Let's talk about the new Eternal Twilight collection from Odens. There's an eyeshadow palette, which is a new type of design, as well as 3 highlighters and 3 blushes. Let's take a look at the eyeshadow palette first. And as you can see, it is larger and the outside packaging is always really beautiful. And then the inside is a bit different because it kind of almost seems like a mashup of 2 palettes next to each other, but put in one palette. So you have the warmer tones and the cooler tones, and the shimmers do have some different textures. And I will be showing you detailed swatches of those and talking about the textures and do we have any squishy shades, which yes we do. Just spoiler alert, there are some squishy shades in here. And the shade Balder is like a almost a marble shade, but not in a marble pattern, a little bit more kind of like there's different pieces, and when you swatch it you get kind of one type of shifty shade. So I will be showing you a look with each of the shades. And then there's 3 new blushes that do have a different compact design to match the theme. I really love it. It's really nice, and I like that it's distinguished from the other collections. So there are 2 matte blushes and then 1 super glowy, almost kind of like highlightery blush. And I'm going to show you the 2 matte blushes, but I will not be swatching them or using them on my cheeks, as they're just shades that I don't see myself using, and I know that I would just swatch them and use them once for the purpose of this video and then just never touch them again. So I actually already passed those on to a friend, but I am keeping the glowy blush, so you will see a swatch of that as well as a cheek swatch. And these do have a different imprint from the other previous collections, so a nice little detailed touch. And then there's 3 highlighters, and if you're familiar with their most recent highlighters as well as some of the previous ones that they launched on the really shiny glittery side, then these seem to be the same formula and they do seem to be shifty. And there is 3 shades, and I think you can already just tell they're super extra shiny. And I will be showing you all the highlighters on the cheeks, and I would send all these products API, so thank you so much to Odens for sending them over to me. And I do have an affiliate code with Odens, which I will put up on the screen in case you're interested in anything from this launch or anything else on their website. Thank you so much if you do use my code. Let's get into the pricing details. So this is going to be launching on September 20th at 11 a.m. EST. And the palette is going to be, it is a larger palette. It is going to be $56.90. And then the blushes are $20.90. And the highlighters are $22.90. So let's get into some of the cheek swatches, the detail swatches of the shimmer shades, and then the 2 looks. And I will give you some of my first impression thoughts at the end of the video. Starting from the left side of the palette, the first shade is Luminosity. This one looks like a pink with a blue shift in it. Once actually swatched out, I really mostly see the blue with a purple shift and not as much of the pink. It's definitely more on the sheer side, and the shade, while very smooth, does feel a little bit squishy in the pan. Below that is Balder. This one is a bright pink shifting to orange to lime green, and this one is very putty-like and very squishy in the pan. Below that is Solar, which is a really beautiful bright orange with a gold flash straight on. This one is harder pressed, very smooth, not as shiny, but definitely has a little bit of sparkle to it. Below that is Guard, and this is a sheer beige with a lot of silver sparkles throughout it. Really beautiful topper like shadow. This one reminds me a little bit of the effect of the Urban Decay Muda shadows. However, the sparkle is much finer than those. Illusion at the top is an iridescent, and it's a little bit textured in the pan. It's also a little bit squishy, about the same as Luminosity, give or take. This one is a purple flash straight on, and it shifts a little bit pink to pale yellow. And then below that is Moment, which is a burnt orange. It's definitely more vibrant straight on, and then on the angle you see a little bit more of a fiery type of orange. And then moving on to the right side of the palette, which is just a silver, very smooth metallic, a little bit harder pressed, similar to Solar in texture. Below that is Void. Void is a bluish silver, and it has a lot of different flecks throughout it, so it's very dimensional. I see pink, I see green, and not really much of a shift on this one. It is just a slightly bit textured and just a little bit squishy in the pan. Doesn't feel overly squishy or putty-like. And the last 4 shimmer shades, first is Pessimistic, which this one is a little bit harder pressed as well and very smooth. And this one is very pale plum toned, almost silvery, and this one has a lot of different flecks throughout it as well. I see green and fuchsia flecks throughout it. Below that is Nothingness, which is the kind of marbled shade, and so this one mixes a little bit interestingly. You can see a mix of dark blue, antique gold in that one. It doesn't seem to really disperse evenly, so this one will be interesting to put on the eye, as I think that you might get slightly different effect between 2 eyes. Something to try out. But also it could just be that this is kind of my like 3rd time maybe dipping into the pan, so I think eventually they might mix more evenly throughout. And below that is Mistletoe, which is a really beautiful, super bright very sparkly but very smooth green shadow. This one does stain just a little bit, and then below that is Plot, which is a black base, blue straight on, shifting to purple. You can definitely see the darker edges of the black base with that one. This one feels a little bit flakier to the touch, but it does completely smooth out. It has a little bit of thickness to the touch. Here's Gentle Firefly. Ooh, definitely picks up a bit flaky. Oh, this is like flakes galore. I might need to be definitely better using a finger, but not really ideal. Just gonna go in with a little bit more. I turned down the lighting, it was blowing me out a little bit, but this is super, super ultra sparkly. Subtle radiance on this cheek, and I'm gonna be using a synthetic, more dense brush to apply this. So this should probably apply a little bit better. Oh yeah, that's definitely better, less flaky. Seems like the same formula, but this definitely kind of pushes it into the skin a lot better, but it's very, like, I can see the sparkle particles sitting on my skin. It's gonna look wet from far away, but from up close, I can definitely see quite a bit of the little flecks. And I see a bunch of sparkles throughout this shade. In the shade Glow Powder, which is an interesting name for a shade, it sounds more like a product description, but I digress. I'm going to be using this Refer collab brush with Alex Anele, and I'm going to be using the side that's a little less dirty. Ooh, definitely very, very sparkly. I feel like I can tell this is going to be one of those formulas. Oh yeah, you want to use, for sure, a denser brush. Something that can really, like, push this into your skin, so it's not just like a bunch of sparkly flakes flying everywhere. But when I push down, it's definitely applying really nicely and smoothing it into the skin. It looks so, so, so shiny. Looks really beautiful. And on this cheek, I'm going to apply Dim Glow. Look at that shine. Oh my goodness. And I'm going to be using this Clionadh blending brush. And it's pretty dense and it's synthetic. And so it's really good for applying these kinds of more sparkly. This is how it picked up. I definitely see the sparkles like really sitting on top of my skin here. So I'm going to try to really rub this in there. And I see a green kind of flash straight on. Kind of want to do a look with each side. So first going to be using the warmer side, and I'm taking Final. And I'm just going to put that on the outer corner. And just blending it outwards. And underneath my lower lash line, I'm going to add in just a little bit more. Just really kind of smoke it out here. Picked up Balder, and this one is pretty flaky, so it does not pick up the best on the brush. And I just misted it with some water, hopefully going to avoid some fallout. Yeah, that is not really coming off. I'm just gonna try to pick up a little bit more, but this is how it picks up. And it's looking very like, okay. That's not great. It's kind of, I mean, it definitely spread it, so maybe I just need to keep going back and forth. I'm gonna bring it up a little bit into my crease. The shade is pretty squishy. Oh, geez, okay. So now I have that all over my under eye. Definitely would recommend using this before you put down your base. It even feels a little kind of tacky on my lid, I feel like. And then for the inner corner, I kind of really want to go in with Luminosity. It doesn't pick up as chunky, and I did miss my brush just a little bit. I misted it with just some water, and I feel like it's kind of, I mean, it's okay, it's going on. And it's kind of flashing blue straight on, which is really fun. And I'm just adding on a little bit more. I feel like it's looking kind of textured a little bit here. I think maybe I put on too much. So far, these shimmers are like kind of a bit different from the previous Odens Eye shimmer shades, like they have a variety of different textures, so these are definitely the more squishy ones in general. There's a couple of shades like Solar and Guard, which Guard is such a beautiful shade. It has a little bit of a pieciness to it, and it's pretty sheer, great like one and done type of eyeshadow. Very, very sparkly, but super, super smooth. And on the drier sides, kind of wish there was more shades like this and this kind of orange. I'm gonna take my pinky and just put Illusion kind of on my inner corner here. Just trying to get all the shimmer shades on my lid apparently. And I'm gonna take Splendid. I'm gonna run that across the rest of my lower lash line. And here's the finished look. For this second look, I did prime with the Pat McGrath eyeshadow primer. On the other eye, I had used the Natasha Denona. And I'm going to take Ashy. And that's going to go right into the inner crease. And that is super pigmented and blending out really, really nicely. And then next to that, I'm taking Escape. This one I feel like is a little bit more pastel for sure. I'm going to blend it underneath my lower lash line as well. Just really blowing it out. And then I'm going to take Ashes and just pop that into the Periwinkle shade. Taking Hoder, I believe is how it's pronounced. I'm just popping that on this outer corner. I feel like that's not really translating. That looks almost the same depth as what I had out there already. Kind of blended. So I'm going to layer on just a little bit more. I'm going to take the shade Black, which is actually kind of more like a charcoal black because there is a true black on the bottom row. Oh, and that is blending so nicely in with that shade. I do want to go back in and just go over the edges here, but look at that. That looks so nice. Picked up Mistletoe. And I'm just going to pop that right here. Definitely need to put some pressure on it because the shade did feel rather kind of tuggy when I was swatching it out. And I'm just going to put it almost all the way out into the outer corner. And it has a little bit of fallout for sure. And then on the inner portion, I'm going to go in with Void. And I misted it just a little bit with just some water. And that's gonna go right in here. And that came on a little bit too chunky, so I'm just gonna use my pinky to try to spread that out so it doesn't look as thickly put on. Ooh, that shade is so pretty, very dimensional. And I'm taking Pessimistic and I'm putting it on the inner corner. And here's the second finished look. So first up, this glow powder, not really something I would reach for very often, but definitely for like a more blingy, beautiful kind of blushy highlight thing. I do think this is a bit more of a highlight. It's not like just like a glowy blush. Like they do have one shade, it had just a little bit of a glow to it. This is pretty kind of sparkly with the shade, and with the highlighters, I would definitely recommend using a denser synthetic type of brush to apply to really push it into the skin. Otherwise, you will have a lot of sparkles just kind of sitting on top of your skin. The highlighters are really, really beautiful. I think these will make really great one and done type of eyeshadows as well. On the cheeks there, again, really sparkly. If you really want to be seen from space, then these are definitely for you. So let's talk about the eyeshadow palette. I definitely think this should have been two separate palettes. I understand the notion of why this is one palette. I'm not too familiar with the Norse mythology, but I just know that they always have a reason for what they do with their palettes, their color stories, etc. So I understand why it's in one palette. However, I think it would have been nice to have this separate, or if there was just a less dead space, I think this should have been like closer in together and really the same distance as these other columns. I just think there's a lot of space in here and it's making this palette even even larger when it's already 2 palettes kind of put together. So onto the shades themselves, the mattes, really, really nice. They're a little bit on the thinner side. Some of them have a little bit more kick up than others. So far from what I've used, currently I have on Afterglow and a little bit of Blackest, just as like a little bit of an eyeshadowing, and the shimmer shade is Guard, which I love this one. So the mattes are great. I've tried a lot of Odens Eye palettes, so I'm pretty familiar with the formula. So far from the shades I've used, I don't feel like any of these are different formula, and they're very pigmented. So this shade right here is so beautiful. It is like a sparkly PC topper like shadow. It feels really, really soft, almost silky to the touch. It has a little bit of like a drier feeling, especially compared to some of these other shades in here. There are squishy shades in here, specifically Luminosity, which by the way is spelled wrong, which I thought we were past this, and Balder. And then some of these other shades feel a little bit like thicker. Moment, Mistletoe definitely feels a little thicker to the touch, Nothingness and Void a little bit, and some of them have a little bit more texture than others, so they are harder to pick up with even a fluffier brush and even if you spray it. So the smoother shades are definitely Solar and Burnout. I would say those are like the smoothest in here. Illusion is a little bit textured, but it does smooth out. So if you have hooded oily lid, you will probably experience creasing with these 2 shades, and maybe to a lesser extent with some of these other shades. Some of these other shades, the thicker shades, as long as you put on a very little bit, you can use a tacky primer. It might not crease as fast. It might crease eventually. I really feel like it's a case by case. Even for me, sometimes a thicker formula doesn't crease on me, and sometimes it creases on me. I would love to see more shades like Guard in future Odens Eye palettes. As for the more marbled shades, I think they're cool, but they kind of look a little bit different every time you use them, and I think they're kind of just like they look nice in the pan, but then once you swatch them, they're kind of gonna mix anyways. I do like each of the color stories separately. I think I prefer the cooler tone actually. I think it's just a little bit more interesting. And the shade Blackest, it's almost actually, it's got a little bit of plum tone to it. When I was putting it on for this look, I kind of noticed that it's looking a little plummy, which is actually really nice because that connects it to this side of the palette. So I feel like this one will be great to use with this side of the palette as well. I don't really see myself reaching for Plot or Nothingness, just not really a type of shimmers that I use a lot. Let me know in the comments below what you think of this palette. If you think that it should have been 2 palettes, if you like that it's both of them, which one do you prefer? Do you plan on picking anything up? I have all the questions for you, and if you're interested in more Odens Eye content, I will leave some videos up on the screen so you can keep watching, and if not, then I hope to see you next time.